Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Theogony. This is our first episode of a podcast. My name is Teddy. I'm going to be one of the four hostmen here. We are also here with Clint.
Yep.
With Dom.
Hello.
And with Alex.
What's up?
And right now, Alex is going to speak a little bit about what inspired us to do this.
So we got inspired to do this podcast because we had been actively encouraged by many other people who already do podcasting to, if you think you have a voice that's interesting and unique, that you should definitely start a podcast because anybody can do it and get your voice out there and make yourself heard. And I was particularly inspired by, I watched the Joe Rogan podcast a lot, and he had Jordan Peterson on, and I had been familiar with a bunch of his other videos, but he had an interview, which if you guys haven't listened to yet, I would suggest going to Joe Rogan's YouTube channel or downloading his podcast and listening to it. It's 3 hours, but it's totally worth it. Where this poor professor, Jordan Peterson, he's a Canadian psychology professor, and he's in a really horrific situation with the extreme liberals in Canada. So yeah, that's pretty much what that conversation inspired this podcast here.
Right. I think it's also important to start off by saying, myself, Teddy, I have not seen this video, and I'm not even sure I agree with the depiction of where Professor Peterson is finding himself. Just so that's out there.
Well, seriously, from like a scientific standpoint, it's good to have kind of like a baseline, someone who hasn't been exposed to whatever the conversation is that's going on, because you don't have any preconceived notions because you haven't seen it.
Yeah.
So
I'm the control group, basically.
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
This is a double-blind study.
Yeah.
So yeah, and another thing we want to do with this podcast is one thing that Jordan Peterson did mention that inspired us to do this is that he said that the metaphysical foundations, I don't remember the quote exactly, but it was something along the lines of the the metaphysical foundations, yeah. The metaphysical foundations of everything we do are kind of drifting by the wayside nowadays, and people aren't necessarily as interested in the thinkers that influenced all of our pop culture, everything down to, whether it's Disney movies or this, that, or the other, these interesting thinkers that had a huge impact on us. And a couple of the people here, and hopefully the people that we'll be having on, will have different knowledges when it comes to philosophy, psychology, mythology, sociology, all the humanities pretty much. And we're going to try to look at different situations through the lens of those subjects and, maybe more.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily surprising that metaphysics has fallen a little bit by the wayside. I mean, there are a lot of new areas of study which have opened up, and at the same time, you really did have I think Nietzsche, who in the late 19th century was grappling with Plato and Plato's legacy in an attempt to maybe push metaphysics somewhere, but in some ways he may have really ended it right there, and we really may not have moved much from there. And we do have people like Heidegger who have excellent essays on what it is to be, but I'm not sure it really picked up steam after that overall.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, and I guess that's another thing that brings us back to the Jordan Peterson podcast, because he seems to have a large base of knowledge to draw from when it comes to what happened in the Soviet Union, just generally communism, socialism. He warns about the ill fates of those who try systems like that, and he just wants people to read. And that's another thing that I think we would echo in here is, if you really want to understand Nietzsche or any of these philosophers that we're about to talk about, don't fucking take our word for it. Go out, buy the books, and we'll suggest some of the the good books that are good to get into those thinkers, and read them yourself
Yeah.
and figure it out.
The reading is really, like, doing the reading yourself is really important because, like, when it comes to certain philosophical studies, like, half of the work of it is actually getting your own interpretation of it. You don't want to just, like, echo something that you've, like, seen on a YouTube video before. You need to, like, make your own opinion and see what you think they're trying to say.
Yeah, it's, I mean, my opinion of it is, it's, when you get into philosophy, so much of it is subjective. Everyone has their own opinions, their own experience to whatever situations that they're writing about, different trains of thought, and people react to things differently than others. And what one person will pull out of an essay, or what one person will pull from a philosophical writer's message, may be completely different than what you yourself or your group of friends or anyone else that you're associated with. Yeah. So actually going out and experiencing it for yourself and giving yourself time to digest the information and to reflect on the information, you're kind of allowing yourself to have your own say into the conversation, not just regurgitating what other people around you say. So it's really important to go out and do it on your own. Take the time to read the essays, to get acquainted with some of the abrasive politics that are going on in your state or whichever country you're living in, just to really formulate your own opinion from your own experience. We really can't emphasize the importance of that.
Yeah, and a lot of people have I think part of it is a lot of people today don't think that philosophy is worth anything, and that it there's no use for it in society anymore, ever since now we have the modern iteration of science and things. So people are very reductionist and objective with a lot of the knowledge when it comes to questions that we can and can't answer and how to think about them. And that's great and all, but I would emphasize that, empiricism's one branch, that's there's a lot of things that the mode of science can't really help us understand, and that pure rationalism might actually able to help us understand. Or as Nietzsche would put it, not even being rational really helps. It's more getting your ideas across through art, through poems, through music, which is something that Nietzsche emphasizes, and that's why in a lot of his books he writes in aphorisms and things like that, because he wants people to get at a deeper meaning than just a circle jerkery of philosophical terminology.
Yeah, or spoken word.
Yeah.
So
yeah, well, you hear people like Neil deGrasse Tyson say there's no role for philosophy anymore, but for instance, just the choice on trying to determine what the sentencing guidelines should look like for ethics, federal crimes comes down to making certain value judgments and deciding how you want the analysis to look and how you're going to adapt to new information and what role that's going to play, and all of that jurisprudence in itself kind of goes back to philosophy. So it's still definitely playing a role here. I would like to ask, since I didn't actually watch this video, what the controversy is. Like, what is the controversy? What is the main issue here that you found so moving for yourself?
Well, we have two different sides of the spectrum clashing right now, and in Western culture, and there's more. It's not just a black and white thing. There's definitely going to be people who fall on the spectrum, but for the most part, you're looking at two ideologies that are coming head to head with each other right now, and you have this this kind of PC ideology. This I can't offend anybody. I want to be as virtuous as possible and not be mean to anybody. And then you have this this other side of the spectrum that was created almost in a after effect. Like this PC movement created this other movement which can get very extreme in essentially making fun of the PC people to the point, or the PC movement to the point where it becomes unhelpful because they just seem like really big trolls.
Yeah.
And really mean people.
It's fighting radicalism with more radicalism, just of whichever as opposite on the spectrum as they can get. It's essentially fighting fire with fire, just a different type of fire.
But you have this poor professor. He's a tenured professor in Canada at one of the big universities. I can't remember which one off the top of my head.
It was Toronto.
Toronto.
Yeah, it was Toronto.
And he's a really smart guy. He obviously knows a lot. He's obviously a good professor and teaches well. He's a professor of psychology, and he also does a different lecture, which he uploads to his YouTube channel, which I would also advise that you guys, if you're interested in Jordan Peterson, going and listening to, because it's really interesting. I think it's called Maps of Understanding, or Maps of...
I'm pretty sure it's Maps of Morality.
It's something along those lines, but it's a great. But he incorporates all of the historical knowledge, philosophical knowledge, psychological knowledge, sociological knowledge that he's gathered throughout his life into making an argument that seems to be very much in favor of individualism versus the collective. Yeah. And he found himself in a bad situation because there's a bit of legislation that Jordan Peterson believes would compel him to use what people consider proper gender pronouns. And this poor guy, Jordan Peterson, he's a psychologist and he's got all this other knowledge. He decides that he doesn't necessarily agree with that. And because of that stance, he's been attacked relentlessly by the essentially militant.
Yeah, it's like a guerrilla militia.
Like a militant outrage culture, essentially.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I want to clarify is like one of the main problems he had was making or using some of the ones that like appear to just come out of nowhere.
Yeah, it's completely outlandish.
So he's talking about the fact that they've invented over 50 or something of them, and he cites even otherkin have gender pronouns now. I don't even know who they is. It's
the best way to describe them is what they refer to themselves as like non-binary individuals, where the structure that we've set with like science and society that, you know, your gender is determined by your sexual like appendages. You're born a man or a woman, or your biology. And essentially these people feel as though that they don't need to adhere to that it's based solely on the individual, and that their labels, the labels that they use to describe their gender, their sexual preference, their spirituality is so malleable that they can create their own and change it at will.
And then compel people to make them, essentially force people by the government gun to say what they refer to them as they want to be referred to as.
Exactly. And they do that under the guise of, if you don't, that it's hate speech, that you are attacking them, that it's like non-progressive. It is and they get very they're very combatant about this. Like they try to enforce it, you know, using any really anything they can use against you. They will contact employers, they will find you on social media, they'll find your email address, your home address, your full name, everything, and they will essentially try to ruin your life. Like, they'll contact your employer and they'll say that...
Get you fired.
Yeah,
which is what's happening to Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, exactly. Like, they will attempt to use you not going along with them wanting to be referred to as... I know some people perceive it as being outlandish, but, I mean, clearly these individuals feel as though that they have a connection to it, which is perfectly fine and perfectly reasonable, but... to the extent that they try to enforce it onto other people, is just absolutely ridiculous. And they will literally try to ruin your life by saying that any dissenting opinions, it's labeled as hate speech, and that you're a racist, you're a bigot, you're a transphobe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So
Yeah.
I didn't realize there was, such a movement, or at least an impression of one here. For the listeners, I mean, if you're a little bit curious about what we're talking about, I believe it's called Bill C-16.
Yes.
It's a piece of legislation in Canada. You can take a look at it. It's really not that long. I think it has 4 short sections. And for the most part, what it is doing is it is adding gender identity or expression, that phrase, to a number of different parts of Canadian law, which have to do with, human rights and laws against genocide, which have to do against prohibiting discrimination, and which have to do with criminalizing hate crimes and criminalizing hate speech, which for this I didn't actually have the opportunity to go to the underlying legislation, but from what I've been able to gather, hate speech would be defined as speech which is inciting hatred, or which otherwise is somehow very explicit, extreme, and hateful.
Yeah. And the problem is that the groups that we're talking about, they consider, when you don't use their proper preferred pronouns, they consider that to be hate speech. And
Absolutely.
That's what Jordan Peterson is talking about. And that's why the school is putting so much pressure on him to stop doing what he's doing. And also Jordan Peterson,
Real quick, I want to say, so on the face of it, at the very least, this bill, which is adding gender identity or expression alongside race, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, does not seem controversial.
No, it doesn't.
On the face of it, I really don't see any issue with it at all. I'm not even sure I see that much of an issue with it as Peterson is describing either. But it seems like he's getting at something deeper than it adding hate speech to Canadian law. It seems like hate speech was already a concept, which is part of the law in Canada.
And I think he parses things out pretty specifically because he's a pretty smart dude. One of the ways he parses this is he talks about freedom of speech, and he says it's okay to limit someone from saying fire in a crowded theater because it makes sense, or bomb on a plane or something like this, or I'm going to assassinate the president. Where he says that, we have to be very careful about that, but certain restrictions are understandable and reasonable. But what he also says on the flip side is when you're a racist, homophobic, when you actually commit like hate speech, they're not making you say anything. They're just taking what you're saying as hate speech. Whereas his point is about compelled speech. Is about forcing him to say something that he doesn't want to say and doesn't agree with. Well,
I will say, from what you've described and people's reaction to even his analysis of the issues, it does seem like it is inciting hatred. It does.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and he's made that point as well. He's told the university multiple times that that he will not stop, and the university has sent him letters explaining, essentially warning him, and his opinion on that is they're trying to position to fire him, which is hard for a tenured professor, but they can still do it. So he sees them doing this positioning and asking him and warning him and telling him to stop, and it's just not something he believes in. So he believes he's standing up for what he believes. He believes he's standing up for the right cause, and he doesn't like people forcing him to say things that he doesn't even agree with the underlying premise. Like if you listen to Jordan Peterson's, the way he talks, he talks about how we really don't know that much about the new movement of the way people are creating all of these genders and identifying as them. He says that we need to look into this and do more studies and aggregate data before we can come to a conclusion about whether, is this stuff that's similar to something like race or sexual attraction, or preferred like sexual partners, things like that.
Yeah. One of the things that should be very specifically stated in this podcast, we have no issue with how people identify themselves. Like, we have no issue with sexual orientation, perceived gender. People are free to do as they wish. Like, we have absolutely no problem. That isn't even a part of the conversation. What we're really trying to get at is the absolute militant and aggressive way that they go about enforcing what they perceive as being important. And because they are able to basically lump themselves into groups of people that they perceive as being taken advantage of by society, people that they perceive that have been disenfranchised, that their word carries more weight because they perceive themselves as always being the victim. So when you don't refer to them however they wish to be referred to, they can literally ruin your life from top to bottom. Your career, if you're in school, they can have you expelled from your school under the pretenses of hate speech and that you're a racist. So really our argument is the methods in which they're trying to
conduct themselves.
The way they're trying to bring all this into society.
Yeah.
It's not the fact that they exist, it's the way that they're going about, how they just attack everyone.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting, just this idea of, if you do create a new protected class that has the ability to define the contours of that protected class.
Yeah.
Whereas it's hard to tell historically because I may just be a product of, having grown up in the 90s and so forth. But when it comes to, race or sexual orientation, or national origin or ethnicity, you can't really there are some pretty defined contours of what that protected class is. They're kind of established in the law. It's pretty clear. I mean, if you want to show a disparate impact on a certain racial minority, for instance, you can actually do that with statistics and go out and find it. So this idea that you could set yourself up as a protected class and then define exactly what that means and where there's being a breach is interesting. I also want to say, though, for Professor Peterson, I think now I'm not as familiar with the situation, so I mean maybe it is them who are the them in quotation marks,
it's hard to define them,
who are ruining his life.
This situation because it's
abroad.
But he's also made the decision to take a stand.
Yeah.
Whereas even if he weren't to allow himself to be compelled to say anything, it may be the stance in itself, which is, leading to some of this backlash. This is also a very sensitive issue. Mm-hmm. Tensions are high.
Yeah.
So if you paint yourself as a target, it's a possibility.
We can easily get into like the meat of the discussion, which at this point is even just the destruction of the English language. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. And I don't really fully wield the English language the way that I'd like to. I'm probably, I'm horrible at grammar, pretty bad at spelling. I think our whole generation is. Maybe not as bad as some people, but definitely kind of rough. We have, T9 and stuff to correct and spell check. And
yeah,
it's great. We grew up in that era. Anyways, but the point is the way we communicate is important. The definitions of words are important, and yes, they can change over time, but you can't just change them overnight and expect people to go along with it, without putting up a fight. And one of the things that I'd like to point out is when it comes to gender identity, I think a lot of people get the ideas of sexual orientation, gender, and sex mixed up. Mm-hmm. And if you've ever taken a really basic psychology course, and this is probably why Jordan Peterson has a specific opinion on this, mm-hmm. is because in psychology there's very, very specific ways you define sex, gender, mm-hmm. and you know, who you are attracted to sexually. So they're all separate things. And when people say, I think it's the idea of you can objectively be with a small margin of error, because there are hermaphrodites and things like that. You can objectively be. We are a two-sex species. I forget what the scientific terminology is for it, but I think it's called dimorphic. I think we're a sexually dimorphic species. And correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah, it's.
But we have male and female, and then we have, you know, every once in a while the statistical anomaly of hermaphroditic of some type. And there's a bunch of different diseases that you can have, which will, you know, cause you to develop breasts as a man and things like that. But they're very, very, very rare. Okay. So what you have is you have a large majority of people catering to a small minority of people. And whenever you have that, you've just got a vast amount of people going out of their way to please a small amount of people, and then they're going to wonder why. Because it's essentially the inversion of utilitarianism. It's the inversion of the greatest good for the greatest number. You know, so it's the idea of protecting a very, very, very tiny minority at the expense of a very, very large majority.
Possibly, I want to just jump in and say I think that, you know, consistently protecting very small minorities may be the greatest good for the greatest number of people overall in the long run.
It can be, but it is a type of tyranny. You know what I mean? It's a type of tyranny. It's tyrannical in a way. You can't. Well, and that's why our. Anyway, oh sorry. Go ahead.
No. Well, my argument with that is, you are perceiving someone as a minority. It's essentially, you have ways of classifying people, you know, whether it's what we just went over, their ethnicity, their religion, where the different parts of the world that they come from. But what we're getting into now is the large majority essentially protecting people that they perceive as being a minority, where these people, a very, very small fraction of these people are actually subjected to the horrible things that we're constantly being told that happens every second of every day. But it's the way the masses just rise up to protect these people. It's almost, they're like serving as a nanny, as if they are of a higher significance, so they're going to protect someone that they perceive as being underneath of them.
The soft bigotry of low expectations.
Exactly. You know, and that's one of the things that I have a really big issue with. It's people just, and it's this whole like holier than thou attitude where
virtue signaling.
Yeah. They act as if, you know, they're protecting someone that, you know, is unable to protect themselves, you know, and I don't know. It's just
it becomes important for people. I think our age throughout different time periods to essentially tell the rest of the world how awesome they are because they act a certain way and believe a certain set of
because they're protecting someone that they perceive as being lower than them.
And this has happened throughout multiple generations, and each generation had their battles. But I also disagree with the assumption that each battle is going to be just as heroic and worthwhile as the next. I think what we have is eventually, if you think about it, we do have a bit of a slippery slope with this stuff. Like it is a slippery slope. That's exactly what it is, because you keep fighting, and then if you win those battles, you lose what you were fighting for, and because you become professional at fighting that, then you have to move on to something else. So, you know, after another, not saying that they're bad or good, no value judgment made. But once you, just in terms of being practical, once you win that battle, you have nothing to do. So you continue on to another battle. Or usually what happens is people grow up, they get jobs, they become fully functioning members of society. And people in college who have a lot of extra time and, you know, nowadays spend a lot of time on Instagram and this, that, and the other will
and Tumblr apparently
develop this hive mentality, where they bully people.
The armies of Tumblr are
the armies
drawing
of Tumblr.
closer to you.
yeah, I think because of our interconnectedness, maybe just the time period that we're in and the fact that we're more connected than any generation before us, I think that's what makes it seem crazier even. Because it actually is crazier that people can pass ideas this quickly, compared to just a couple generations ago before computers, when you had to be on TV or send a letter or any of this stuff. I mean, everything's widely open to everybody. So you have a lot more people shouting,
Well,
just for the good and the bad.
I will say, I'm not sure that the progressive movement has had such a large string of victories in a short period of time that, there has been kind of this raising the battle standard while looking for something to do, and not being sure where it is. I think, there are a lot of issues that still need to be addressed.
Certainly.
Everything, from like socioeconomic status.
Mm-hmm.
I even think, you were talking about victories. If you were talking about, things like homophobia and gay marriage, I think there's still work to do there as well. So I don't necessarily buy into the idea that, they win a battle and now they're just looking to spin their wheels a little bit. I think, there are important issues to address. Yes, Don?
I agree with you, but like what I don't even know if I 100% agree with myself on this, but I feel like they might actually be focusing on the wrong things here, because I feel like the socioeconomic things and things of that nature would probably be more of importance to strive for than what is currently going on with this kind of situation.
Maybe I think you're right. I think also we need to keep in mind, queer theory has been around since 60s or 70s. It's been gaining steam, and they've been focusing on non-binary individuals and kind of the spectrum, and the fact that these very, very basic and fundamental aspects of our society, including our language, aren't actually matching up with what may really be happening among people. That these social constructs like gender now are not matching the language the way that our society is functioning now. And so, so they're taking a crack at reforming language, but when you reform language, it's kind of tough because everyone speaks it. And so if people aren't all speaking it the same way, then maybe you get things like hate speech laws. But this isn't something that just came around, just yesterday.
Yeah, certainly.
Well, I consume a lot of, this is just for the listeners, I do consume a lot of podcasts and I listen to a lot of different people, and I'm sure you'll hear me repeat some of the things they say, but because I think that they're super clever, I will never take credit for something someone else says. It's not my idea, it's someone else's. I think everybody here would agree with that they're not going to take credit for anybody else's thoughts. But what I will say is I might not remember where they come from. It's kind of hard to keep track of after a while of hundreds of hours of listening to podcasts and things like that. Whether it's, I watched freaking Sargon of Akkad and he said this and I misattributed it to someone else. I apologize in advance. But one of the most interesting things I heard recently was the definition of racism is changing. Racism, the definition of white supremacy, the definition of things like that, and it changes. And I don't mean, once again, no value judgment here. We're not talking about whether it's good or bad, but it's just interesting that when people, especially on this side of things, the progressive side, when they feel like they've been backed into a corner with an argument, they just change the definition of terms so that they feel like they have a stronger foundation for their arguments. For example, with the word racism, I regularly see on social media all the time that racism is no longer just thinking that, the classic definition of racism, as far as I understand it, is that you legitimately believe that because of your biology and because of your skin tone, that you are better than someone else and that they are sub from where you are, or vice versa, this, that, and the other. And that's really, and that definition has changed over time, and I totally follow it. But where it's gotten to now is this racism is prejudice plus power. I think is the equation that they're using now, which is, by the way, just bad math. And once again, this is something I was listening to. I think it was Ben Shapiro that said this was really funny. If you're saying that it's prejudice plus power, so therefore African Americans can't be racist, Asians can't be racist in America, things like that, because they're not the ones in power, so they can't be racist. If that's your argument, then that's just bad arithmetic, because if I think you said something along the lines of this. If you have prejudice, but your power is 0, what are you left with? if it's a arithmetic simple addition.
Yeah.
You're left with prejudice.
Yeah.
So the idea is like it doesn't even work
Yeah.
under a rationalistic kind of overview of just the equation that they're forming. So the idea that you can't be racist unless or the idea that you can only be racist if you're white, or the idea that you can't be racist if you are any other ethnicity or race, is a little outrageous to me. And that's something that people are trying to push. So I kind of understand where Jordan Peterson is coming from with this whole thing, where you have these, for lack of a better word, ignorant people that want to change a word in a way that doesn't even make sense. And they'd probably be with you if it made sense, but it just doesn't.
My whole thing is they're sensationalizing words now. Certain words carry a certain weight. Throughout American history, the word racist has always held a significant weight in a conversation.
Yeah.
And essentially what they're trying to do, they're trying to use these, a lot of people refer to them as like buzzwords, like these progressive, liberal, left side buzzwords. They're essentially trying to label you with these buzzwords to throw you off track, to essentially send you off balance.
Discredit you.
Yeah.
Dude,
because
that's so racist.
Well, yeah, but no, that's essentially what they do. You know, it's because no one wants to be labeled as a racist. You know, as soon as you even get the mere like just beginning of that, you're stopped in your tracks. You know, when someone tries to confront you and accuse you of something that has always been regarded as one of the lowest forms of just social being in our country, you know, it just completely throws you off the rails. And
that's kind of a good thing in a way, isn't it? Because if we thought that racism was an okay thing still, then people wouldn't be so bothered by being called racist.
Yeah.
But one of my main concerns is I feel like with these new, for lack of a better word, let's call them word changes, change into the meaning. I feel like with these progressive changes of the word, some of these words are actually losing their meaning.
Absolutely.
And could actually make it worse. Like in that situation, like if people no longer believe that, being called racist is like as bad as it used to be because you believe that some people on Tumblr contorted the definition until it fit their meaning, then it doesn't stop you in your tracks anymore, and it could potentially lead to a worse situation.
Yeah, they're essentially these words that have carried so much significance in our brief history in the United States, like they're watering them down to the extent that they're going to be meaningless. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You know, and really it's their fault, you know, and that's their nuclear warfare button. That's the first thing that they go to when the conversation or the argument isn't going in their direction. That's the first thing they do. They just try to send off like, oh, you're a racist, you're a bigot, you're a homophobe, you're whatever. And after time, you know, people are only going to listen to that to a certain extent. And it's just, we're going to build like a second layer of skin to it. Yeah. Like we're going to become calloused to it. And they're not going to have those simple, you know, underhanded weapons to use against everyone that disagrees with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah. And it's going to completely rework the way we talk to each other, the way we explain things that are as horrendous as racism.
Yeah, like,
you know.
So I think the shift has been over a shorter period of time than we've been talking about. So, for instance, Congressperson Sessions, right, who's I think being tapped for the Attorney General, said a lot of very racist things in the 80s, early 80s, I believe. I'm not super informed on this. At a time where it was not considered, I don't know, to be as bad, or where maybe it was like a bit more normalized. Whereas, you know, then going through the 80s into the 90s, early 2000s, you know, it got really serious. So, I mean, this is really, we're only talking about a period of, you know, 3 decades here. Because then even if you go back to the civil rights movement, that wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, it's true. Absolutely. It wasn't. And they were fighting for things that were way more important than the people today are fighting, which is what I was talking before. And not like
buses and stuff. Whereas now we have Ubers.
Yeah. Well, Well, they were,
I think
they were fighting.
They use their phone to call an Uber, and then
even-
accuse their driver of being racist if they're fucking 15 minutes late or something.
Yeah. Or if they have the
what they
hula
do.
girl on the dashboard. You see
Oh, Jesus Christ!
Did you
dude,
hear
that was
about that?
fucking
Did you
hear about
ridiculous.
What?
Okay, so essentially, this one girl got picked up by an Uber driver, and he had
it
like,
might have
a
been
little-
Lyft.
Or
But
yeah,
same-
no,
same
it was a
same
Lyft.
deal,
It was a
yeah.
Lyft, but yeah, essentially, he had like one of those little dancing hula girls on his dashboard, and she got like, we can talk about this word
Pretty
later.
fucking
She
just
got really triggered by it.
Yeah.
God, triggered, and
Did she have like a bad experience?
No, she was just like she essentially said that like you have no right to have that hula
He had
girl
one
up
of the
there
dancing hula girls on his dashboard.
because you aren't
Hawaiian.
Hawaiian, so
Yeah.
like
That it was cultural appropriation.
yeah.
And
That his dashboard figurine, what you see in like movies, I'm pretty sure they had in like the National Lampoon's movies, like Vegas Vacation, when they're fucking driving across the little
Very
dancing,
common.
bobbing hula girl that goes on your dash in your car, that was perceived as being cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
And what she referred to as respectfully asking the person to remove it from his vehicle. They were in his vehicle. This wasn't a company vehicle. This wasn't a public taxi. This was his private personal vehicle. She asked him to remove it from his dash, and he refused. He said
It's
very
glued.
nicely, yeah, it's glued to my dash. This is my vehicle.
It'll do damage to my vehicle.
Yeah, I'm driving you 10 blocks. Can you just get in my car, give me my $20, and just go on with your night? Go ruin someone else's, evening.
He was very nice.
Yeah, he was very
Super
nice.
calm with her. He actually was
on
like very-
video or something?
Yeah.
Dude, it went viral.
She
on
videoed
YouTube.
it because she said she was
videoed
going to
it.
get him fired, and she did get
And
him
she
fired.
did for a day until she put the
video up.
No, she sent the video to the company because she thought she was still in the right.
Yep.
And the company was like, "This is ridiculous."
Yeah.
gave
And then they
his
hired
job
him
back.
back.
And then they brought him back.
Because essentially, she did the cultural appropriation bit, but then she also went into this is insensitivity, you don't understand what happened to the Polynesian people at the hand of the white man. And then the driver said, well, I'm not white. And she's like,
this
yeah,
is
you
my
are.
vehicle. Like, I don't
And he's like, why are you assuming that I'm white? I'm actually... I think he said mixed Asian.
Yeah, I think
He's like,
something.
I'm mixed Asian, so I'm not white. I don't understand what you're talking about. And then she got even more upset, and she's like, I'm gonna make you famous. I'm gonna get you fired. I'm gonna make you into a
threatening
meme,
him to put
and
him on
everybody's
God.
gonna hate you.
Which it's not a physical threat, but it's like a threat of defamation.
Yeah.
That she's going to put him online and
gonna ruin his life.
I mean, especially if he's
Defame-
going to be on Gawker.
Yeah.
They're pretty
To be-
much the defamation people.
Yeah,
be fair.
exactly. But
and
but
also
that's what they fucking do.
Gawker wasn't dead yet, so
Yeah, now it is. Or it's getting...
Why?
What do you mean?
For defamation.
Oh, yeah. There you go. There you go.
Man.
Yeah.
But
So
there's situations like that, and we could go over a bunch of them. And anybody, let us know in the comments section if you think that we should go over these issues and then take maybe a more foundational philosophical, psychological standpoint or viewpoint from these, because I know there have been hundreds of YouTube channels that have gone through these same events that we just explained to Teddy, and people have already watched this video back and forth, up and down. There's already, people super famous have already commented on these things. So what could we possibly say that's different, except from the viewpoint of maybe philosophically foundational stuff, or maybe psychologically foundational
That's true.
stuff.
So, like, Descartes might say that the hula girl's not even real.
Yeah, that's true.
The only thing she can be sure of is, that she's thinking.
I mean, are we not sure that...
Are we even having this conversation?
The famous tautology.
Sure, yeah.
Famous tautology.
Did the hula girl appropriate the hoop from a previous culture? So was she culturally appropriating while being culturally appropriated by the evil Lyft driver while he was driving around an angry feminist at 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock at night?
Are we talking about mind-body dualism now? Is that...
Yeah, possibly. You see, how deep does the rabbit hole go?
Oh, it goes
That's
so
what
deep.
I'm asking. It's pretty deep rabbit hole.
It is a deep, deep rabbit hole.
The deepest. Yeah.
deepest and darkest.
We totally just got super off topic.
Another thing that we're going to be concentrating on more as we go through these podcasts, when we record more of them, is I forgot what I was going to say. Actually,
It's just the pilot episode.
Be sure to leave what topics you guys want us to talk about in the comment section below.
Totally.
We'll totally do it.
We want to
Totally
get
interactive.
people. Yeah. We want to get people more interested in philosophy. We want to, because I think once again that one of our goals is to get people more interested. And if you are interested, we can definitely suggest some things to read, or we can talk about where you can find any of the ideas that we're talking about. And we can go into any number of great thinkers, and you can also tell us if you want us to talk about a certain situation a certain way from a certain viewpoint. The great thing about philosophy is you don't have to be dogmatic. You can see things from multiple perspectives, and some of the most brilliant minds ever to walk the earth. And all you have to do is pick up a book or listen to us talk.
I think it was Machiavelli, who had a quote where he said, one of his favorite times was at night, because he would, close the doors and put on his sleeping robe.
Yeah.
The good old days.
And then like speak with giants. And he was talking about, he would close it all and just like read some of the classics. It was like one of his favorite times.
Yeah, so
I could totally be misattributing that quote. I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he just kept or maybe some giants actually lived in his backyard.
Yeah,
He just opened the windows.
Oh, no, I mean,
and
if he
talked.
said that quote, that's what it meant. I'm just not sure if it was him who said it.
Ah.
but
Yeah. Ooh, knowledge.
Yeah. So good.
yeah, I mean, when it comes back to the Jordan Peterson thing, like he did mention a lot of different people that we could talk about potentially. He mentioned Carl Jung, if I'm not mistaken. He's obviously an avid reader. Obvious to me because I've read a little bit, but he seems to be an avid studier of Joseph Campbell, who's a mythology guy. Carl Jung, psychologist, and he also mentioned Nietzsche. He mentions a lot of different people, but in those videos, he was using those specific people, and what he was doing is relating Disney stories like Pinocchio and things like that to archetypal settings, and trying to make people understand that the reason these stories are so important culturally, and this leads to a larger point, but the reason these stories are so important is because they follow a very specific pattern that's almost ingrained into us as human beings, which is very Jungian. It's also very Campbellian. But and he also uses Nietzsche to describe the way to essentially forward yourself as a human being, become the best possible version of yourself, and things like that, and telling the truth. And he also explained a little bit about religion, which Joe Rogan couldn't really grasp around, because Nietzsche's very interesting with his religious criticism. So he didn't really.
And that he hates Christianity.
Yeah.
And Joe Rogan kind of took it as he was talking about how important some of these stories are on a social aspect, with which Nietzsche talks about how he, like some of the Old Testament stories and things like that, are very important to humanity in the way that they allow us to group together and stay alive and do this, that, and the other, and forward ourselves as little tribes / communities / nations, blah, blah, blah. And Joe Rogan, the only thing he could really do was be like, well, there's bad stuff in there too, but he didn't realize that he's talking about Nietzsche, who had no love, no real love for
Plato's religion.
Most of religion. Yeah. So,
so he saw as Plato's religion. He thought Christianity really was a religion that was able to very clearly communicate Plato's idea of morality as really having these kind of dichotomies involved. And he disagreed with it. He thought Plato was guilty of the noble lies.
Yes.
I don't even think Nietzsche probably thought he was superior to Plato. I think Plato was his, and like the boss at the end of a video game that he was trying to get to, except Nietzsche didn't have multiple lives to get there. So, he was intimidated, but
no respawn.
But that's what
it's always a spike pit.
That's what he was trying to do, because Nietzsche's obsession was the deadly truths, as opposed to the noble lie. And if you want to get kind of a better look at Nietzsche, one person who I thought was very insightful. Was Lawrence Lampert has a couple guides that'll take you through aphorism at a time. Thus Spake Zarathustra, or Beyond Good and Evil, to kind of get at some of the bigger ideas Nietzsche is playing with under the surface.
Good luck getting through Thus Spake, by the way. That is intensely difficult. I wasn't.
It's really easy with the guidebook. He goes sentence by sentence.
Man, I'll have to get that because I got 20% through that book and didn't understand a damn thing. And don't feel bad. Don't get discouraged if you pick up especially someone like Nietzsche.
Yeah.
I mean,
Kant.
Kant. You got to be careful with the German philosophers, but generally speaking, and the French ones. The French ones are crazy too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, my golden rule, my Kantian golden rule would be for no one to read Kant.
Yeah, he's significantly difficult.
Because I believe if everyone did that, we'd all benefit.
Well, the hardest book, Teddy used to refer me to books to read when he was done with them, and he gave me History and Natural Right by Leo Strauss. Mm-hmm. And I got one chapter in, didn't understand what the hell was going on. And I've tried to reread it a couple times, but that man is way beyond me. I don't get it, and I'm going to have to revisit it soon. Yeah. I want to tackle it, and don't feel discouraged. A lot of people don't understand them. Even people who say they understand Nietzsche don't understand Nietzsche. Teddy, you should tell them what your professor who's read Nietzsche like 20, 30 times said about how to read Nietzsche and truly understanding like certain philosophers. Tell them. I think it's important.
Okay. I really don't remember what you're referring to, but I'll start with, one thing I think you always want to do anytime you read any book is you want to go for the sympathetic interpretation. I think there's been a lot in education, and rightly so, towards critical thinking. Mm-hmm. And as you're going through trying to think critically about what they're saying, whether they're right or they're wrong. But when you're reading something, so influential that was probably written by someone smarter than you, someone who maybe stood out in his several centuries as being one of the smarter and more influential writers, you first want to go through and read it the first time just to understand what they are saying. Because it's not always easy to grasp, and sometimes there are several different levels to it. Sometimes they may be trying to get main points across to people who aren't willing to read as deeply, and then they have kind of more methodical arguments buried in there as well. I think Locke is a good example because
John Locke is.
Because John Locke really a lot of his authority that he finds his natural laws are derived from when he's writing the book is God. Mm-hmm. And he quotes some influential Christian leaders to support his arguments when Locke was an atheist and didn't believe in Christianity, and it was really to make it more palatable. Then again, one of the nice things about people being able to understand John Locke is since so many of his ideas have been incorporated in at least the American legal system and the Constitution. I feel like everyone has a pretty good idea of some of his general concepts.
Well, whether people know it or not, they're influenced by all of these thinkers because it sinks down through everything that we have. The mark of a great philosopher is, long after they're dead, still you having a thought that they actually worked out and you thinking that it was something you thought of, but really you were just watching SpongeBob and the characters interacted in a certain way and you thought to yourself, oh, that's a cool idea, without realizing that the writer was influenced by another writer of another TV show who was influenced by this philosopher who was influenced by this philosopher that came before them. Mm-hmm. And before you know it, Nietzsche creates the idea of a superhero. Carl Jung maps out the journey of a hero and the archetypal structures of different characters and stories. And that's really what modern comic books come from, is those thinkers and their works kind of bleeding down through our culture.
Well, there's almost like different tiers of messages that you can take away from a philosophical essay or a philosophical writer. Yes, they have these very like deep, convoluted, difficult truths that they're trying to convey to the readers. But then there's also very simple messages that you can just kind of pick from the very top. Like which is one of the reasons why I've always gravitated towards duty ethics or like Kantian ethics or Kantian philosophy, is because it's just very simple messages like, knowledge comes from experience. Unless you experience something, you don't have like a full knowledge of the situation or an understanding of it. And, very simple things like don't use other people as a means to an end. It's just, that doesn't take a Mensa powered mind to understand. Like, you can read this and just pick it right off the top, and almost instantly your life is significantly better just having these very like rudimentary messages that you're able just to pick up a book and within 15 or 20 minutes understand it, digest it, and just begin using it in your everyday life. So it doesn't have to be some like Harvard level, you're locked in a library for, 3 months of winter and you do nothing but read philosophical essays. It doesn't have to be this daunting task. It can be a more pleasurable experience for you.
That being said, guys, it is starting to be winter, so if you want to lock yourself somewhere for 3 months and read, go for it.
Yeah, it's
Straight up Nietzsche.
We emphasize it.
Just go out in the mountains somewhere.
Take some Heidegger, and you can bring some James Joyce as a chaser. Since you're getting too tough.
Chaser. No, I think there's something to be said for what you guys are talking about, and I think another way it could be framed is so this idea of straw manning and steel manning is very interesting. For those people listening who don't know what a straw man is, it's when you take the weakest form of your opponent's argument, or maybe something they didn't say, and you say that they said it, or say they said it that way, and then you knock that down because it's easily defeatable.
Like a scarecrow.
Exactly. Yeah. But steel manning is this idea that's coming up where you would take the best possible version of someone's argument and try to knock that down and see if that holds up to snuff.
It's like a Gundam.
And that's like a Gundam.
And that's the sympathetic way to. That's what most philosophers have the outlook when you're learning one mind versus learning how another mind is thinking. You're very sympathetic when you're reading, and then you can watch these, for lack of a better term, titans duke it out.
Yeah.
You don't have to do it yourself. You can read Jefferson on Plato. You can read Nietzsche on Plato.
I thought we were talking about titans.
Jefferson was a titan, bro. What? Come on. Library of Congress, man.
He was a great lawyer. Politician.
Oh, man. He was one of the most well-read founding fathers that we had.
Well, he wrote the Declaration of Independence. I hope so.
I would hope so.
Yeah, he's a very, very smart guy.
Everyone's read the Declaration of Independence.
That's
probably gets him above most of the people right there. I don't know, with Federalist Papers too, a lot of people read them. It's hard to attribute who exactly wrote which ones. So maybe that.
Yeah, I like Jefferson a lot, but he has character flaws, as many of our founding fathers did, usually the same ones. But
he had many more than.
Yeah, if you wanna read, you can watch the Titans battle it out. Because they usually refer to each other. They usually destroy each other. If you want to read Beyond Good and Evil, the whole book is Nietzsche destroying other philosophers, bending them over a table and doing naughty things to them. So if you're into that sort of thing, definitely read them. But
you really like the mustache men doing
it's also hard with Nietzsche because you need to have a base of knowledge almost to read something like that.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know the arguments of Plato, then how do you know what the arguments against Plato are?
That's true.
And you might know
he
them.
Tells you.
Well, in Nietzsche's words, what Plato's arguments are. And they still battle it out today in our culture, if you think about it. A lot of the things that we consume are Nietzsche and Plato going at it. Rousseau and Spinoza and a lot of these other people that we'll talk about in the future, just titans just battling it out.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to go back to, if we want to just go full circle, I know I didn't watch this video that we discussed in the first half, but one of my favorite things I've read is On Liberty by Mill. And
Yeah,
John Stuart Mill.
John Stuart Mill.
And he has, I think a very good illustration and argument for free speech as being necessary in order to preserve robust understandings of what we have decided is right. In the free marketplace of ideas, you have bad ideas, you have good ideas, but only by keeping that marketplace open will people of a given generation understand why their idea is actually a good idea. Why justice is important or mercy is important. Because as soon as you start to weaken that marketplace of ideas, as soon as you stop hearing all the hate speech, it hurts your understanding of, why we have this strong idea of, mercy and justice and, protecting, people's fundamental rights or human rights and so forth. And so, over time you kind of lose a handle on that, and then you risk losing some of the, primary virtues, which makes the country great. So I think John Stuart Mill is a good place to start if you want to take a look at free speech and what some of the benefits of it are. And he's a very clear writer. I believe he was American. I mean, I think, it's very clear. He goes about it in a very logical way. And it's pretty short as well.
You can, it's almost like the different societies produced these very different paradigm shifts in the way people believe throughout time about certain foundational things that we take for granted. And you have different movements from different countries almost. So if you guys want to understand classical liberalism, a lot of the things that a lot of the ideas that form this country, you should study the British philosophers. If you want to learn about existentialism, nihilism, you should study the German philosophers. Yeah. If you want to learn about, there's
Kant too, right?
What?
Kant?
Wasn't Kant German?
Yeah, he was German.
Yeah.
But it was very Christian ethics.
Yeah, true.
There's
very
there's crossovers. There's crossovers. But
no, I understand.
For the most part, you know what I mean. It's like these...
Yeah, if you want a deeper appreciation of croissants, you can go to French literature.
Absolutely. Just the stereotypical...
Got him.
Just...
I would personally start with the ancient Greeks.
Assuming their philosophy.
But
you just assumed their philosophy. You did. You assumed their points of view by their geographical location in which they were.
How dare me?
How dare you?
How dare I?
Once again, the armies of Tumblr drawing to your gates.
It's cool, man. My gates have foam pillows that can withstand the armies of Tumblr.
What is Tumblr? Is that like MySpace or like the Twitter?
It's like Instagram or something. It's like
it's just a fucking wasteland of people that just... Dude, it really is. It's like a radioactive wasteland of people that just slosh around and just accuse each other of just different horrendous things, and it's just really
the collective deadening of the intellectual mind.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
It's pretty bad. Yeah,
they're just in a circle jerk of
liberalism, essentially.
Just like this, whirlwind tornado of tomfoolery.
Yeah.
Tomfoolery.
That ends up in the most horrific types of... you should see some of the pictures and some of the memes and some of the things they say are grotesque.
And
it's like 4chan?
Grotesque.
Actually,
yeah,
really, and I'm really happy that you brought that up, because some of the reactions that you will get from people on sites like 4chan and these other like Tumblr, 4chan, Reddit, like these almost like fringe websites where just the most extreme people exist, where you get some of the darkest things that just occur on the internet. This is just the spawning place of all these things. Their whole message is, the way they want to convey it to you is just this progressive, inclusion, diversity, and all these, beautiful things that sound awesome. It sounds great in spoken conversation. It looks great on paper. But when you go against their ideologies and their opinions, you have an opinion that is... It doesn't even have to be completely opposite from theirs. It's just, just straying away from what they said. They will attack you with some of the most grotesque things I've ever seen or heard in my life.
The amount of vitriol they can summon
Yeah,
makes them like level 40 wizards in my mind.
Absolutely. And these are the people that are these are like the stoic defenders of the perceived minorities that we talked about earlier, like the people that they perceive themselves as being, this holy great power that's just going to swoop down and protect everyone that our society essentially shits on, and then just
Yeah.
The hive mind, the Reddit hive mind.
The hive mind.
Essentially,
Yeah,
it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, maybe we should end it here because I feel like we...
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, we hope you enjoyed this. I think it's been about an hour and 8 minutes or so. I don't know how much how long it's been.
Good enough.
But we might make these a little longer in the future depending where we don't have any cap for how short or long they're going to be. We're just going to talk until we get bored.
Yeah.
But we'll be back again, definitely, to talk about some more stuff. You guys want to say anything? Or?
Leave a comment below.
Yeah.
Tell us what you thought. Tell us what you want us to talk about.
Yeah, I would actually like to thank you, Alex, Dom, and Clint for sitting here with myself,
Teddy.
Teddy.
Yeah, Teddy.
You too, Teddy.
Oh, guys.
Oh, you
Aw.
big Teddy.
This is a nice moment.
This is.
All right.